Mystical Islands has finally arrived, and we're doing a full in-depth breakdown of every card in the set. That's right, over 80 cards. We're going to be breaking them down right now. Let's start with Grass. Now, first up, we have Execute, which is going to look a little strange on the surface. It still has 50 base health like the old Execute did, but this one has the Growth Spurt attack that takes 1 grass energy from your energy zone and attach it to this Pokemon. It also still has 1 retreat. You might ask yourself, Josh, why would I play this instead of the old Execute? At least the old one can do some damage. Executor EX does not need more than 1 energy on it, and this can do a couple of things for you. So if you're using Executor EX, it's got that triple retreat cost, so it's kind of hard to get out of the active spot. Execute can help you eventually get rid of your Executor out of the active spot. You play your Execute, you put an energy on it, right? You use the ability, you have 2 energy, you evolve into Executor EX, and then you just need like a Speed X or something to get it out of that active slot. In addition to that though, it also will work well with the new Executor, which is gonna be 130 base health here, which is nice. And then it has the Psychic attack. So it does 80 damage at the cost of 4 energy, but then it does 20 more for every energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. So if they're a big ramp up deck where they have 4 energy attached to the Pokemon, this Psychic can do 160 on a stage 1 non-EX Pokemon. So this could be a pretty good one of in a lot of decks with Executor EX in them, in conjunction with the new Execute, where you can go for the old game plan where you just evolve into Executor EX and then do 40 and 80 damage to try to stall out a little bit. Maybe you'll get an extra energy from the new Execute so you can retreat it easier, or instead of evolving into Executor EX, you can evolve into the new Executor, put another energy on it, right? And then start doing psychic damage for 80, 100, 120, 140 in a lot of circumstances with 3 energy, up to 160 sometimes as well. And then if you have weaknesses on top of that, you can go up to 180, right? Pretty easy, a little bit simpler here as well. And this can also be combined with another stage 2 Pokemon that we'll talk about in a second. So in general, I think both the new Execute and the new Executor have a couple of places that could potentially see some play, especially in these grass-based ramp decks. Now, next we have Celebi EX, and I think Celebi EX does have some play potentially to be a very powerful card in this new metagame that should probably be sort of swapped up a little bit with the advent of Mystery Island here. So we have Celebi EX 130 health as a base Pokemon, which is very nice for a basic. And then it has Powerful Bloom, a Colorless, and a Grass. 50 times, flip a coin for each energy attached to this Pokemon, and it does 50 for each heads. Notably, it's not for every grass energy, which doesn't matter too much right now, but it is for every energy attached to it. So this is very similar to Marowak EX, right? Where Marowak's 80, flip 2 times. This one's 50 per heads, but this one can also, you can flip more than 2 times. You can get to 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 in a lot of circumstances out there. This could be played, I think, in the deck that I want to try it out with. Combination of the new Execute, new Executor, Executor EX, and maybe put in some Leaf in there as well so you can swap back and forth, build up your Celebi EX on the bench while your Executor EX is just flipping coins, doing 40 to 80 damage, and then come out with a Powerful Bloom. There also is going to be a new card that we're going to talk about right now that makes this even better. So I think Celebi EX is going to be one of the all-stars of the new set, and I'm looking forward to the potential of this card sort of shaking things up. It does have the downside as well. It is weak to fire, and Charizard and Arcanine are just going to absolutely one-shot this thing, but you live and you learn, you get some gloves, and I think this is going to be a very good card. And a lot of that reason is going to be because of Superior. So Superior here kind of takes the cards we just went over with Executor as well as Celebi EX and makes them even better. So Superior here, stage 2 Pokemon, 110 health, and it does have Solar Beam for 70, but the real reason that we're here talking about this card is Jungle Totem. So every energy that is a grass energy attached to a grass Pokemon provides 2 grass energy instead. This effect does not stack, so you can't have 2 Superiors on your bench getting 4 energy or whatever for every single grass you have, but this allows you to power up your Pokemon. It's sort of pseudo ramp in a circumstance like this. If you have 2 grass energies attached to your Celebi, right, that's going to be providing you 4 total energy, allowing you to flip 4 coins, which is pretty powerful. That's up to 200 damage there. Superior as well, 4 for 70 is pretty terrible, but Superior itself, this is basically a 2 energy for 70 damage. Now, the damage ceiling on Superior itself isn't the highest in the world. Stage 2 doing 70, not the best. A lot of the times you want your stage 2s to be doing 100 plus damage or 80 and do some sort of status effect. This one though is going to be a pretty powerful mainstay in a lot of grass ramp decks, whether it's using Celebi and Executor EX, or if you're just putting this with a Venusaur EX and allowing you to ramp up that Venusaur. So I see a lot of players out there, if you haven't already done it, putting Superior in a grass deck and making an entire deck based around this very powerful ability of Jungle Totem. Now, you griefers out there might like this next one here. 90 HP on a stage 1. Shiinotic is going to allow you to be a little bit of a sleepy gamer. We've seen the Wigglytuff EX decks. I'm a fan of those as well. And we have yet another sleepy man for our sleepy needs. So this is going to be 2 energy, Flickering Spores, does 50 damage, and the active Pokemon is now asleep. I don't think this is going to be crazy in a lot of circumstances, but I think that you could put together some sort of deck that, well, just wants to annoy your opponent, maybe sleep them, maybe poison them in a lot of circumstances, make their life kind of hectic, make their game a little bit of RNG, right? This comes out, and you can attack on your second energy, right? It's a stage 1, not a stage 2. So all those things line up. It's pretty decent, and it is auto sleep. So they have to flip that heads in order for them to not be entirely locked out of the game. And sleep is one of the best status effects that we have right now, sleep and paralysis in TCG Pocket. And this could be something that you could be looking towards. I'd give it like a 3 out of 5 in a lot of circumstances. Now we have Dhelmise, which isn't the greatest Pokemon face value. It has 100 base health, which is nice. Double retreat instead of triple retreat, which is usually we see like triple retreat for something that's a base non-EX Pokemon that has 100 HP or more. And then it has energy whip for a single grass that does 20 damage. And then if it has at least 3 extra grass energy attached to it, it does 70 more damage. Now, the thing about this though is that it's pretty good with the Superior evolutionary line, because with Superior, your grass energies and your grass Pokemon, they count as 2. So if you have just 2 actual grass energies on your Dhelmise, this thing's doing 90 damage a pop for a basic non-EX Pokemon. That is incredible. That's like Pikachu EX levels, right? If you think about Dhelmise as like a Pikachu EX, instead of needing a full bench of electric Pokemon like Pikachu EX does, you basically just need to work on evolving into that Superior as soon as possible. Then you have 2 grass energies for 90 damage. If you want to kill 100 HP Pokemon, Giovanni's right there for you as well. And then it also only has 2 retreat costs, which is pretty nice on top of that, making it pretty easy to get out of the active zone, whether you do or do not have Superior on your bench. So I think this is going to be a pretty strong Pokemon. I could see it as like a 1 of or a 2 of. Depends on the breakpoints that we'll be seeing in this meta, but it's a pretty decent Pokemon. I'll give it like a 3.5 out of 5 here. It's pretty strong. Off of grass and back into fire now, we have the new Ponyta, which I don't think is going to be used all that much. Stomp does 10 up to 40. If you flip a heads, it does 30 more damage. Old Ponyta is just a simple 1 energy, do 20 damage, a little bit consistent, allows you to really make those Rapidash Blaine breakpoints in a lot of circumstances for an aggressive deck. A lot more consistent for you. I don't think we'll be seeing a lot of this Ponyta, but we might see this Ponyta replace the old Ponyta just so you can do like, get lucky, do 40 damage, evolve into old Rapidash, and do another 40 more plus Blaine, which gets you up to 110 with 2 attacks. That's pretty decent there as well. We also do have a new Rapidash, 100 HP, 1 retreat cost. Rising Lunge, very different than the old Rapidash, which is just 40 damage for 1 fire energy. This one is fire and colorless for 40 damage. And then if you flip a coin and it lands on heads, it does 60 more. So this is a pretty big breakthrough point. I think this Rapidash is pretty nice if you want to have an aggressive deck that wants to maybe put 1 more energy on your Rapidash on the new one compared to the old one. And the base effect is still going to be that 40 damage. If you get lucky though, you can do 100 damage with this. And then if you have access to your friend Giovanni, that's 110. If you have access to your friend Blaine though, you go all the way up to 130 damage on a Rapidash, which is pretty nice. So I think this is like a nice budget card, just like the old Rapidash Ponyta aggressive fire decks were before. It's just a little bit of a, do you want to be flipping the coins? So I think it's fine. I don't think it's crazy though. Now we have the new Magmar. I'm not going to waste your time too much on this card. I don't think this card's all that good. It's 80 HP on a basic Pokemon. Fire Blast does 80 damage for 2 energy, which is awesome, but it also forces you to discard 2 fire energy as well. If you want to do some sort of aggressive deck, possibly you put this in there as one of your basic Pokemon. You lead with Ponyta Rapidash, and while they're being super energy efficient on their turns, with their 40 damage attacks for 1 energy in the case of old Rapidash, you can slowly build up a Magmar on the bench, right? Put some 2 energy on it. And then, you know, for your last prize, right, your Ponyta, your Rapidashes, they get knocked out. You bring out the Magmar. It works with Blaine, so you can go up to 110 damage. It could be pretty decent. I don't think it's going to be like archetype defining, but for a budget option, if you're going to be doing like a Pony to Rapidash, Magmar could be there in that deck as well as a budget player for these aggressive fire-based strategies. Outside of that though, I don't think it's going to be seeing a lot of play, and you're probably going to be passing this one up. In a similar vein, we have the Larvesta Volcarona line. Larvesta's nothing special, 2 energy, 30 damage, 80 HP on a basic Pokemon. Volcarona, the stage 1, 120 health, 2 fire energy, 1 colorless, does 80 damage to any of your opponent's Pokemon of your choice, but you have to discard 2 fire energy from this Pokemon as well. You could see this possibly as some sort of weird Moltres Volcarona deck where you just put a bunch of energies on your Volcarona and you can try to snipe Pokemon off of the bench in conjunction with the new Pokeflute, which allows you to just give them a Pokemon that you've KO'd that's a basic and put it back on the bench. Maybe you flip some coins on your Moltres, you get some heads, you put a bunch of fire energy on your Volcarona, you swap the Moltres out, and you just keep sniping the same Pokemon over and over and over to win the game. Maybe KO something that's been, getting energy on the bench that your opponent's trying to level up so they can evolve and really come out and KO you that way. But you can get ahead of them, right? KO the Pokemon that's got the energy invested on it, and then just bring it back and KO it again, and then bring it back and KO it again, and win the game that way. So an interesting strategy to be sure, but definitely does not just go into a pre-existing archetype. But it could be some play being seen with the new item card in the form of Pokeflute. I think it's called Pokeflute. I'm gonna call it Pokeflute. It looks like a Pokeflute. Now we have Salandit here, 60 HP with Venoshock, 10 damage, but if the opponent's also poisoned, it does 40 more damage. It is interesting that this card itself has no way to poison a Pokemon. It also is interesting that this is a colorless attack. So you could utilize this just in the basic form in like a Weezing deck where you're Weezing like poison something, you Koga it, you scoop it up, and you bring out your Salandit and just hit it for like 50 damage, I guess. But it also does work well with its stage 1 evolution in the form of Salazzle, which is 80 HP for stage 1, pretty low, but it does have Poison Claws, 1 energy, that's fire, 30 damage, and it automatically poisons the opponent's active Pokemon. So you can use one of your Salandits, evolve it into Salazzle, poison that way, and then you just bring in your basic Salandit afterwards, come and do 50 damage, clean up, possibly. That way being said though, I'm not really seeing these cards being utilized in the best way. I don't think they're meta breakers. I'll give them like a 2 out of 5 stars here. They're okay, but they're not like the greatest. Now, next up we have Magikarp, and this one I want to talk about briefly because Gyarados is pretty good as well. I think Gyarados EX in this set, and this ability Leap Out seems kind of like whatever. It's kind of garbage, right? You can retreat it for 1 energy anyway, so why would I want to use this Leap Out ability instead of just playing with old Magikarp? So Leap Out allows you to do something pretty cool, where you have these bad hands and some of these Misty decks that really want to maybe get Magikarp evolved into Gyarados, Misty it, put a bunch of energies on it. You'll get those bad hands from time to time playing these ramp decks. You might know this, where you start with just 1 Pokemon, right? Maybe you just have Magikarp in your opening hand, but you have a Pokeball, maybe you have an Oaks Research, so you can get some other basics out, and you can swap them, but that's kind of energy inefficient. So what you can do is, in these circumstances, right, you can start with Magikarp in the active slot, maybe you go in second, super cool. You put an energy on it, you Pokeball for another basic that you want to just have out there. And instead of discarding the energy to swap the Magikarp or relying on also drawing something like X Speed or Leaf, he just has an attack that allows you to be energy efficient and swap him out and keep him safe so you can evolve him into Gyarados later. And speaking of Gyarados, we also have Gyarados EX, which is a card that I think could be pretty cool. Now, this one is a little bit different than old Gyarados. It's 180 HP on an EX stage 1, which is a lot of health. That's a tremendous amount of health on a stage 1 EX Pokemon. And it has Rampaging Whirlpool. So for triple Hydro Energy and then 1 colorless energy, so 4 total, it does 140 damage, which is quite a lot. And then it discards a random energy from among the energy attached to all Pokemon, both yours and your opponent. So the old one was like Hyper Beam that would allow you to discard an energy off of the active Pokemon for 100 damage. This one's 140, and the upside of this is that you can just keep the energy clean off of Pokemon on your opponent's bench. Yes, it affects yours as well, but you don't really care if you're discarding energy off of Gyarados EX. You just put an energy back on it. What this allows you to do is get really lucky with Misty Flips, ramp this out, and then while your opponent's trying to play a fair game of Pokemon TCG Pocket where they're just getting 1 energy per turn, you're just Rampaging Whirlpooling over and over and over. You're just doing 140 damage, and then also if you're trying to like charge up a Pokemon on the bench, you have the ability to just keep discarding that energy off of them and allowing them to never really get into the game. So it's a very RNG hit or miss Misty ramp strategy. Is it going to be one of the best decks in the format? Time will tell based on just everything that's going on. But if you're looking for a Misty strategy that can kind of lock your opponent out of the game and allow you to just win games, flip some heads on Misties, start spamming Whirlpool, rampaging all their energy away so they can't ever get back into the game, Gyarados could be good that way. So I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to give this like a 3.5. I'm gonna give this like a 3.5 out of 5. I would like to try this deck out. I don't want to say it's like a 4 or 5 because there's so many Misty strategies, so many strong water decks already between Starmie, and that Starmie's deck's getting a card that we'll talk about in a second here as well. Articuno, Lapras EX, a lot of Blastoise, a lot of decks out there that already have the Misty strategy capability. So this is just gonna be another one of those that allows you to play around with that very powerful support. Now, speaking of powerful water cards, we have Vaporeon, which is going to be the stage 120 health, double retreat cost, has water splash, 3 energy to do 60 damage. But the ability we want to talk about here is wash out. Now, as often as you like during your turn, you can move water energy from your water bench Pokemon to your active. Why would you ever want to use something like this? Well, basically it allows you to be very tempo oriented and energy efficient. What does that mean? Well, maybe it's easier for me to give you like a situation, right? So you can see this play out in your mind instead of me just telling you all these different things. So for example, Starmie EX, very easy, comes out of the gate swinging, 2 energy, 90 damage. Eventually you're gonna wanna, retreat that Starmie EX before it gets KO'd. Well, if you do that, you save yourself, your opponent from getting 2 points on you, but then you just kind of have like a Starmie EX sitting on your bench with 2 energy. And you kind of need to build up other Pokemon at the same time. So say you have like an Articuno that it's turn 3 or whatever, can't attack yet, your Starmie EX is going to die next turn and you kind of need to retreat it. What does Vaporeon do for you there? Well, you retreat your Starmie EX, you bring out your Articuno, it has no energy on it. You put your energy on your Articuno for the turn, that's 1 energy. Then you can use Vaporeon to move both of those Hydro energies off of your just retreated Starmie EX, put them on your Articuno, now you have 3 Hydro energy and you're just hitting things with Blizzard. So it allows you to be very energy efficient, make free retreats, use some energy from some of your other Pokemon, and allow you to not ramp in a way. It doesn't ramp you, but it allows you to trade your energy around and keep that tempo, right, that you would have missed if you just had Pokemon sitting on your bench with nothing to do and they have their energy on them. So Vaporeon could be pretty powerful in a lot of these circumstances. I think the mainstay for a Vaporeon deck will involve Starmie EX because they work so well together. And then you just throw in something like Lapras EX, or maybe you want a Blastoise deck, or maybe you want Gyarados EX in there as well. Come out hitting, do a bunch of damage, and then just continuously do damage over and over and over because you're able to just swap some energy around and swap it to a new Pokemon and just keep taking the game over from that point. We have a couple of fillers here. We have Fidian, 60 base health, Water Gun, 20 damage. Great, we love to see it, right? And then we have Luminion, 80 HP on a stage 1, Aqua Liner. Pretty cool attack here, does 50 damage to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. 50 for 2 to anything you want on a stage 1 is pretty decent. This gives me some Zebstrika vibes, right? Could work well on like an Articuno deck as well. You hit some things on the bench for 50, 50, 50, right? And then you retreat the Luminion, right? It's got free retreat, just like we talked about. Bring out the Articuno, swap the energy from Luminion back to Articuno because you have Vaporeon EX in there as well, and just start blizzarding things, taking things off of the bench. So could be a pretty cool strategy, right? Vaporeon, Luminion, as well as something like Articuno EX all in the same deck. Doesn't take up too many deck slots. You just have 2 different stage 1 evolutions, but it's about like a 2.5 out of 5. It's a pretty decent card. Next line we have is Choodle's line, Bite, 2 for 30, nothing special here. It does have double retreat cost on an 80 HP basic Pokemon. So that seems to be about where we see with these. And then if you want to put this in your deck, you get Dreadnought, 130 health on a stage 1, triple water for Crunch, 70, flip a coin. If heads, discard a random energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. I don't think this is gonna get played that much. I'm gonna give it like a 1.5, maybe a 1 out of 5 here. I don't think we're gonna be talking too much about this turtle. We have Cramorant as well, 80 HP basic Pokemon that takes 3 energy to get its attack off, and it's just dive, 60 damage, flip a coin. Of heads, it doesn't take damage or effects next turn. So you're not going to be seeing this one either. Give this one a 1 out of 5. Now we have the new Pikachu as well, which is 60 health, 1 retreat cost, Circle Circuit. It does 10 damage for every benched lightning Pokemon that you have. The Pikachu we had before was basically the same thing, except it did 20 damage always and guaranteed for 1 energy. Is this one better than the old Pikachu? I would probably say, depending on your draw, the old one could be a little bit better because it's a little bit more consistent. We've played Pikachu EX decks before. You're not always going to have your entire board, right? Your entire bench full on your first attack of the game. So the difference between doing 10 more or doing 10 less or 0 in some circumstances, I would probably liken that the old Pikachu is probably a little bit better than the new one. If you get all your luck lined up, right, you do your Circle Circuit, you get 1 more damage. Could be cool there. Not entirely sure, but we do want to talk about the new Raichu though. I actually like this card quite a bit. Raichu here, stage 1, 120 health, has Giga Shock, triple lightning energy, 60 damage, and then does 20 damage to each of your opponent's bench Pokemon, which is pretty awesome. Now, this is very similar to Articuno's Blizzard, which does 80 for 3, but then does 10 to everything. This one does 60 to the active and 20 to everything else. Now, how good is this? Time will tell, but it's a pretty decent option for Pikachu EX decks if this helps you hit certain breakpoints on your opponent's bench Pokemon. And what do I mean by that? Well, maybe, you didn't get your Pikachu EX ready to rock and roll right away. You get your Giga Shock off, you hit some things for 20 damage on your opponent's active bench. That might help your Pikachu EX when it comes out with its 90 damage, start one-shotting things that couldn't one-shot before, right? You do 20 to everything, and then all of a sudden your Pikachu EX is doing 90 on something. Well, that's 110 already, and then Giovanni can get you up to 120. So Raichu EX hitting things on the bench allows your Pikachu EX to start one-shotting things that have 120 HP, which could be a break point for those decks. It might not necessarily be one, but if there's a lot of 120 health Pokemon that give Pikachu EX a little bit, I don't know, of a run for its money, you could see this being used. Also notably, this is a Raichu, so you can Lieutenant Surge energy from something like the Magneton up to it, and instead of just discarding all the energy afterwards, you can just sort of ramp up into Giga Shock pretty fast. Just start Giga Shocking things while you build up a Pikachu EX to come in and clean up afterwards. So it's a pretty decent card. I'm gonna give it like a 3 out of 5. I think it's pretty strong. It might even need to be higher than that. I'll give it like a 3.5 out of 5 actually. Now, speaking of being able to do damage to bench Pokemon, we have the new Electabuzz, which also could see play in Pikachu EX decks because of Thunder Spear for the same reason we just talked about with Raichu. So this is a basic Pokemon, 70 health, 1 retreat cost. Thunder Spear allows you to do 40 damage to anything of your choice. So you can work on some of the more, I don't know, higher HP Pokemon on your opponent's bench with your Electabuzz. Maybe they kill your Electabuzz, maybe they don't, but you're able to do damage to the Charizards or whatever Pokemon that you don't want to see come out and just start doing big damage, right? That your Pikachu EX cannot one-shot, right? Where the opponent can one-shot your Pikachu, but your Pikachu can't one-shot them. You can put some damage on them with something like Electabuzz, and then when they do bring it out, or you force them to bring it out with something like Sabrina, you're ready to rock and roll with your Pikachu EX, and you just do 90 more to it and it's gone. So if you get like one of these off, right, 1 Thunder Spear with a Pikachu EX, that's 130. Giovanni's 140. If you get 2 Thunder Spears off, you can take something all the way up to 180 health and kill it with just 1 attack of your Pikachu EX while your Pikachu's safely on the bench until it's time to strike and they bring that out into the active slot. So it's a pretty strong card. I would not be surprised if we see this get a little bit of play. I'll be playing in my Pikachu EX decks. I think it's pretty cool, and you can use it instead of something like Pinchurin, I think. And speaking of more electric Pokemon that are pretty aggressive, we have Joltik here, 40 health, very low, but it does have 30 damage for 1 energy in the form of Bug Bite. There's a very few amount of Pokemon that actually have 1 for 30s with no downside. This is one of them. It is going to get KO'd very easily though. In the stage 1 of Galvantula, 80 health, not a lot tankier than the basic here, but it does have Electro Web, which is pretty interesting. It is 70 for 2, which is on par with some of the best stage 1s energy to damage ratios that we have in PTCG Pocket. And on top of just being super energy efficient, like something like Electrode, this makes it so your Pokemon cannot retreat next turn, your opponents anyway, which is pretty nice. You do trade off the free retreat of Electrode for having this you can't retreat on your opponents. Time will tell if this is going to be better than Electrode. I think it will be better than Electrode because, well, I don't really care if I come out Electro Web you and you kill my Garvantula, right? I don't care because a lot of the times that means I can bring out my Pikachu EX. You're already severely weakened from the Electro Web, And if I'm electro webbing your big, heavily invested Charizard or something, then I'll probably be able to KO you with my Pikachu EX. In some circumstances with Electrode though, you take the 70, you retreat, you had something already charged up on the bench, and the game kind of falls away for me there. So this could be a pretty sizable option for Pikachu EX decks, which is kind of weird. I didn't expect Pikachu EX to get so many different sort of cards you could try out in that archetype, and it seems like there's quite a bit between Galvantula as long as Electabuzz and the new Raichu. And yes, we are gonna have one other card you could put in Pikachu EX with Dedenne here. Now Dedenne 60 health, 1 retreat, Thunder Shock, 10 damage, flip a coin of heads, the opponent's Pokemon is paralyzed. Say that 3 times fast. This is very similar to Pinchurin. The difference here is Pinchurin does a little bit more damage, has 10 more base health, but also takes 2 energy to do its like a little see if I can paralyze you attack. The Dedenne, you can maybe try it out as like a one-of in your Pikachu EX decks. It allows you to do a little bit of chip damage early on while you build up your Pikachu EX, get your board situated. And if you're lucky, you can cost your opponent some attacks, right? Maybe you're playing against Moltres Wildfire and you, on your first attack, you're going second, you paralyze it, they don't get the Wildfire anymore. On top of that, it also starts doing a little bit of chip damage, maybe a little bit of RNG in your favor. Maybe you get 20 damage off with your Dedenne before it goes down, but that 20 damage is just enough for your Pikachu EX's 90 damage attack to start one-shotting things with Pikachu in the active slot. So could be another good card, and I'm honestly surprised how many electric Pokemon that we got that could be viable in a Pikachu EX deck. Now we have Mew EX. Mew EX is going to be it's a 5 out of 5 card in my opinion. It's probably going to be one of the mainstay cards that you will see in any sort of competitive deck, whether it's Psychic or not Psychic. Mew EX is 130 health on a basic Pokemon, only has 1 retreat, which we love to see. 1 Psychic Energy allows you to do Psy Shot for 20 damage. That's fine, but then it also has the genome hacking ability that allows you to choose one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks and you use that attack. Now, why is this so strong? Well, it just allows you to use it. You don't have to meet the requirements for it, meaning that if your opponent has like a Charizard out, Charizard says discard 2 fire energy to use this attack, you can use that attack even if you don't have any fire energy on your Mew EX. And if you don't have any fire energy on your Mew EX, you also don't discard anything because it discards just fire energy. So a Mew EX allows the Psychic deck to counter one of its worst matchups in the form of Charizard EX, because Charizard can one-shot Mewtwo EX and everything else in the deck, but Mewtwo, the deck, has no way to one-shot a Charizard, so they usually lose to just a big Charizard ready to rock and roll. And Mew changes that entirely. It also is a Psychic Pokemon, so if you're running it in the Gardevoir Mewtwo EX deck, which I think this is going to be a staple in, you can use Gardevoir to put an energy on it, meaning that you can start genome hacking things very, very quickly as your Mew comes off of the bench. So very good card. And outside of Psychic decks too, you can use this in anything. So if you're playing some sort of stally strategy that loses to big ramp strategies like Venusaur EX or Charizard EX or whatever have you, you can have a Mew EX in your deck, like your Wheezing Muck deck or whatever, right? Or your Arbok deck, and just have it in there as like a one-of. And if you see circumstances where like, oh, my opponent's going to have these Pokemon that I just can't deal with, while you're stalling with your coughing, wheezing Koga strategy, you can start building up your Mew EX, bring it out, and just start one-shotting all of your opponent's Pokemon with all of their incredibly powerful abilities and skills. So this is going to be a mainstay card. If you got one, you're going to be using it, I think, in a lot of places. It's going to be a very flexible card for a lot of players in Pokemon TCG. I can't wait to brew with this bad boy. 5 out of 5, obviously. Now, we also have a little bit of a monster for Psychic here as well, right? Back in the day when the game first came out, a lot of players played Meowth, right, to draw some cards. Sigilyph is a basic 80 health, so a little bit tankier than a Meowth is Psychic, 1 Psychic Energy, Spike Draw, 10 damage, draw a card. It also only has 1 retreat cost. So if you're playing on a Psychic deck, Sigilyph's pretty powerful in those circumstances. Now, does it make the cut in the traditional Gardevoir Mewtwo EX Mew deck? I'm not entirely sure, because putting one of these in your deck, it does increase the ability for you to draw into the Gardevoir line. However, it will decrease the consistency of you getting the basic form, the basic Pokemon, Ralts, for that Gardevoir line at the start of the game. So it's going to decrease, if it's in your deck, the consistency of you getting Ralts, but it will increase the consistency of you getting actually up to Gardevoir by drawing Gardevoir and Krilla and all the other cards that you want to see in that deck. So I think it'll be played with and tested with a little bit. That deck did try out Meowth every once in a while, and that deck is just a better version of Meowth because it's just like a tankier version of Meowth. So we'll see where this one goes. Right now, I'm just gonna give it like a 2.5 out of 5. It's a fine card. It's never gonna be like the craziest thing that's making your deck work, right? If that was true, Meowth would be a 2 of in all of those decks, but it's not. So we'll see where the Sigil flies. Now, speaking of aggressive psychic types, we also have this man right here. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name. I forget. It's like Bohemian or something. Bohemian. I don't know. Anyway, Mind Jack, 10 damage for 1 psychic energy. Then there's 20 more for each of your opponent's bench Pokemon. So they can have up to 3 bench Pokemon. So this could potentially be 70 for 1 on a stage 1 Pokemon with 90 health. That sounds amazing. But the downside being Psychic already has an incredibly strong archetype. So I don't think it's going to be worth throwing away the Mewtwo EX Gardevoir Mew EX deck that we have now for this sort of like aggressive, like this card plus maybe Mew EX to charge up, right, with your energy while this guy just does damage for 1. There's too many ways to play around it. 70 for 1 is cool. It's not always going to be that though. It could be 50, it could be 30. Your opponent can see that you have the basic version of this. This is the only thing that's going to be able to evolve into. And if you're playing some tournament or something, they can easily play around this card a little bit there. Is it going to be good? I don't think so. I'm going to give it like a 2.5 out of 5. It's fine. It's a good budget card, but I don't think it's going to break through and make a brand new Psychic deck, although I could be wrong, I suppose. Now, we also have the new Flabebe line. Now, Flabebe itself is pretty interesting. All of these Pokemon, all the way through the evolutionary line, they do something different, which is pretty interesting. Now, this one is going to be 1 retreat, 40 health, very low, but it does have Hypnotic Gaze for 1 psychic energy. It automatically puts something to sleep. Very similar to the Jigglypuff promo, except this has 40 health instead of 50. They both basically get one shot by anything in the game. The stage 1 version of this Pokemon though, Floette, 70 health, still 1 retreat cost, and then it has a Leaf Drain, 40 damage for a single psychic, and it does and heals 10 health off of this Pokemon as well. The healing, not the craziest. 40 for 1's pretty decent, right? We've seen that from like Rapidash, etc. A lot of Rapidash is held up and propped up by Blaine, but pretty decent, but nothing super special. And then we have Florges, which is 120 health, Bloomshine, 2 psychic for 80 damage, and then it heals 20 from all of your Pokemon. So this is like a Butterfree that needs to attack to heal everybody, and it's pretty decent as well as far as energy to damage ratio. I mean, 80 for 2 is pretty up there, but it is a stage 2. A lot of times I like my stage 2s to do more than 80 damage if possible, or have some sort of ability. If Florges had an ability on top of that, we'd probably be talking a little bit better about this. With that being said though, I mean, if you're playing in some sort of a non-EX metagame, you could maybe put something funny together with like Florges plus Butterfree, just make it entirely a psychic deck, and just have Florges and Butterfree just healing 40, healing 60 damage from everything a turn. And if your opponent can't one-shot your Pokemon, they're probably not going to be able to do anything to you. So in the general gist of the game, I don't think it's that good of a card. I'll give it like a 1.5, honestly. But if you're doing some weird thing where EX Pokemon aren't allowed, you're in some tournament where the damage ceiling for how much damage something can do in 1 turn is severely reduced to like 60 to 80 damage per turn, then this card could be pretty cool in a pretty wonky deck. All right, dude, to focus up, Swirlix, we've seen this card a million times. 60, 1 retreat, 20 for 1, awesome. Then we also have a Slurpuff, 100 health, Magic Shot, 60 for 2, 2 retreat cost. The most vanilla Pokemon of all time that looks like a vanilla Swirly. 1 star. Another Mankey, we're moving into fighting type. Focus Fist here, 1 fighting energy, flip coin of tails. It does nothing for 50 damage. Now, this one, I think if you're playing Mankey and Primeape, you probably won't be using this Mankey. You probably won't be using this Primeape either. Let's talk about them both. Primeape here is just 50 for 1, so ultra aggressive, but I think the promo Mankey that does 10 to itself into the normal Primeape that can do up to 100 damage for 2 fighting energy is probably where you want to be in that circumstance. I could see you maybe using 1 of this Primeape in your deck for consistency of evolution with the old Mankey, the old promo one. So you have like 2 old Primeape and then 1 of the new Primeape. So you can just kind of get in there and make sure you do a bunch of damage. The Primeape and Mankey lineup, though, is pretty good with this next card, which is going to be Marshadow. So imagine a deck where you have the old super aggressive Mankey Primeape line, maybe one of the new Primapes as well. They do a lot of damage, real cheap, but they die pretty fast. Enter Marshadow, which is an 80 HP base Pokemon, 1 retreat cost, that has Revenge, Colorless, Fighting Energy for 40 damage, but if any of your Pokemon were knocked out by an attack during your opponent's last turn, this does 60 more damage. So you have some really aggressive lines where you start with Mankey, you do 30, you do 10 to yourself, you evolve it into Primeape, you do 100 damage, you KO something, you put an energy on your Marshadow, you do 100 damage, you don't KO something, they KO your Primeape back, you put your second energy on Marshadow, bring it out, Revenge, 100 damage again, and you've just dealt, what is that, 230 damage with no Giovanni's, no nothing, over the course of, a couple of attacks with your Pokemon, which is pretty, actually, is it more than that? Yeah, it'd be 330 damage in 4 turns, which is pretty good. Attaching 4 energy into aggressive deck and doing that much damage right away is pretty powerful. So I think if you're looking for a aggressive, fast budget deck, Marshadow, Primeape, and the old promo Mankey is a deck archetype that's probably worth looking at. Stong Jorner, dude, it's a better Onyx. It's a better Onyx. Onyx out of 10. Now we have a new Coughing as well. This Coughing, I like it quite a bit, but I'm not sold on it for sure. Now let's talk about it. 70 HP, just like the old Coughing. This has double retreat cost though, which is a big downside compared to old Coughing. Old Coughing was only 1 retreat cost, allowing you to swap it out with X speed. And it also had, 1 for 20 on like tackle. This one is Division, which puts 1 random Coughing from your deck onto your bench. This allows you to go and get that second Coughing for these Coughing, Wheezing, Stall strategies. And one of the best things that you can have for this Coughing, Wheezing, Stall strategy is to always have another Coughing on your bench. So you can have Wheezing in the active slot, put it back in your hand with Koga, put your second Coughing that was on your bench up into the active slot, and then use the Wheezing you just put in your hand and evolve that Coughing into a Wheezing as well. So this prevents you from, really getting unlucky and not getting the second Coughing. It allows you to thin your deck a little bit, allows your Pokeballs to be better, at the downside of having a second retreat cost and also not having an attack that does any damage. So I think I'm going to try this guy out. I like a lot of Wheezing Stall strategies, and this adds consistency to your Wheezing Stall strategy. So I'm checking this boy out with the old Wheezing. However, we also do have a new Wheezing as well, which maybe you'll see as a one of in these decks. Stage 1, 110 health, just like old Wheezing. Triple retreat cost, just like old Wheezing. But instead of having the poison ability and having a 1 dark energy for 30 damage tackle attack, we have Smoke Screen, 2 dark energy, 50 damage. And then during your opponent's next turn, if the defending Pokemon tries to use an attack, they flip a coin. If tails, it does nothing. So I like the old Wheezing better, having the ability to poison something, tackle. That's a lot of damage that adds up over time. However, weirdly enough, this Wheezing works really well in the Wheezing Stall Koga strategy. And it's kind of made even better. You would be like, oh, but it's not consistent enough. You're basically making a deck that wants to have both Coughings. So you can have 1 Coughing be the old Wheezing, evolve into that, Koga that into your hand, and then evolve the other Coughing into the new Wheezing and do Smoke Screens so they're poisoned and they can't hit anything and they're just slowly dying. The new Coughing fixes that though, because as soon as you get 1 Coughing, you get the other Coughing. So I'm interested in this as like a one of. I'll be trying that deck out quite a bit. If you're a Wheezing Wigglytuff gamer, I mean, this is basically, it's a weaker version of Sleep. So you can do like a Wheezing Wigglytuff EX deck as well. I'm interested in this. You let me know what you think about it down below. I'm not going to say this like a 4-star card or anything, but I think these cards could be pretty prevalent for those specific archetypes. So I'm interested in them. Hey guys, let me know if you've seen this before. 60 base health, 1 energy, 20 damage, 1 single retreat cost. That's crazy. All right, then we have the evolution of Liepard here. Very similar to Rapidash. 90 health, 1 retreat cost, 1 energy, 40 damage. So Dark does get like a Rapidash equivalent of old Rapidash. Doesn't get to use Blaine though with this, so I don't think either of these cards are all that great. But we are doing every card here, so we had to talk about them, all right? Sign on off. We also have the new iteration of the Muck line, but it's not Muck, all right? It's gonna be the Venipede line. Let me know if you've heard this one before. 60 base health, 20 damage on Ram, 1 retreat cost, crazy. This goes into the Whirlpeed though, stage 1, 90 health. For 1 energy, it does Poison Sting, 20 damage, and it automatically poisons the opponent's Pokemon, and now you have a 2 retreat cost. It's fine, but this goes really well into the stage 2, which is Scolipede. Now, Scolipede has 140 health on a stage 2 as a non-EX. That's pretty decent, actually. Venoshock here for a Colorless in a Darkness does 70 damage, but if they're poisoned, it does 50 more. So this can go up to 120 damage, and you still keep that 2 retreat cost. I don't know exactly how I feel about this card. I want to say it's probably pretty powerful, but it's on a stage 2. So there's a lot of things you can do with this. The stage 1 actually goes very well into the stage 2, right? You have Whirlpede, 1 energy, 20 damage. The opponent's Pokemon is poisoned. So you do 20, you end your turn, they go to 30. They end their turn, they go to 40, right? Then you evolve. You only need to put 1 more energy on it, so that works very well, right? Slides right on in there. The opponent's Pokemon already has 40 damage on it. You Venoshock them. They're poisoned, so you do 120 more. That takes them all the way up to 160 damage, which is enough to KO in 2 turns almost everything in the game. Now you're going to end your turn as well, and that's going to go to 170. And then if you have Giovanni, you can do up to 180 damage between Whirlpede, attack 1 time, Scolipede, attack 1 time, all the way up to 180 damage, which is pretty cool, and it's very energy efficient. The weird part about this, though, is that it's so energy efficient that it doesn't really line up super well with it being a stage 2, right? Because you're going to have to play an energy evolve, in a lot of circumstances if you're on the draw. But what it does allow you to do is be very good on the play, right? So you can be on the play, you have Venipede out, no energy for you. The first time you get to put an energy on, well, you evolve into Whirlpede, put an energy on, Poison Sting. Next turn, evolve into Scolipede, put 1 energy on, KO. That's going to be a very aggressive lineup there. The downside comes after that, though, is you don't have another way to poison the active Pokemon. So until we get something that can like be a trainer or an item card that poisons something, or we get a Pokemon that can poison from the bench, Scolipede's going to have this very nice lineup until the active Pokemon gets KO'd, and then you're just kind of like sitting there with the retreat cost of 2. You could use Leaf in conjunction with something like Coughing and Wheezing to re-poison Pokemon and Koga them back to your hand and put Scolipede back out. There's a lot of things you can do. I think that at the end of the day, this is going to be like a 2.5, 3-star card, though. If we go through a full deck breakdown eventually, it's probably something I'll be using. You let me know what you think about it then. Until then, let's move on. Now we have Drudidon, new dragon Pokemon. I didn't expect this guy. 100 health on the basic side. Then has Rough Skin. If the Pokemon is in the active spot and is damaged by an attack, do 20 damage to the attacking Pokemon. And then has Dragon Claw of 90 for Fire, Water, in a Colorless. Now this one, I'm not too sure about it. I don't think I'll put it this way. If this card gets played at all ever, it won't be because of Dragon Claw. If this card gets played at all ever, it'll be in some weird stall deck where you poison something with Wheezing, right? And then you Koga it back to your hand and you just leave Druddigon out there. And you're just like, all right, you take poison damage, and then if you hit me, you take 20 more. Depends on the breakpoints. If your opponent can do 100 damage over and over and over and just one-shot the Druddigon, not that great. If your opponent has to hit it 2 times, that's 40 free damage for you in conjunction with poison. Your turn, opponent's turn, your turn, opponent's turn. That's 80 damage between 2 attacks onto Rough Skin plus 2 whole turns of poison. That's 80 damage without you attacking at all, which could be pretty decent out there. I don't think he's going to be that good, though. I'm going to give him like a 1.5 out of 5. But if there is a circumstance where he's played, it's going to be specifically for Rough Skin and not for Dragon Claw at all. Now we have the new Pidgey line as well. The new Pidgey is 10 less health than the old Pidgey of 50 instead of 60, but it does have Flap, which does 20 for 1 instead of, I think Pidgey did 10 for 1 before. So I think that this is probably in a lot of circumstances an upgrade, because you can do this Pidgey into the old Pidgeotto into Pidgeot, because this is going to give you a little bit more damage. A lot of the times, whether you have 50 or 60 health, you die to the same things a lot of the times. So being able to do that 10 extra damage guaranteed is probably going to work out into your favor. I don't really like this next one, though. This version of Pidgeotto, 90 health, fine. 1 retreat cost, still have it, cool. Wing attack, though, 3 energy for 50 damage is so under... It's just so bad that I would use the old Pidgeotto. 1 for 30, cool. Why would I ever want to worry about getting 2 more on my stage 1 to do 50 damage? It's a terrible attack. But then we have the new EX, which is Pidgeot EX. 170 health. That's pretty tanky. I didn't expect it to have that much. I was thinking like maybe 160, but it's got 170. And then it has Shattering Cyclone. So this is 3 energy, 80 damage, and then it does 20 more damage for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Now, is this going to be an all-star? I'm not sure, but we're going to get ahead of ourselves here because it's relevant to this discussion. There is going to be a new item card that allows you to take a basic Pokemon that has been put into your opponent's discard pile, basically from getting KO'd. You put it back onto their bench. So this attack allows you to do up to 140 damage without Giovanni, 150 with Giovanni, which is enough to KO Mewtwo EX, which is nice. And then instead of it getting weaker, you can just give them another copy of their garbage Pokemon to just do more damage. And you put that Pokemon back, and then you still are doing 140 to 150 damage with your Shattering Cyclone or Scattering Cyclone. So it's a pretty cool little guy out in here. I do think it's pretty interesting that if your opponent has a bunch of benched Pokemon, Pidgeot EX is really good. But if your opponent doesn't have that many benched Pokemon, it's pretty bad. But if your opponent only has like one benched Pokemon, then normal Pidgeot's really good, because normal Pidgeot's ability is they get to choose which Pokemon to swap from their bench into the active slot. But if they only have one, they don't really get a choice. You just are like, oh, hey, I'll take that guy and put him out there. So I could see a deck that has both Pidgeot EX as well as Pidgeot in it. And then depending on the circumstances, if they have a ton of bench Pokemon, you evolve into Pidgeot EX. If they only have like one, you evolve into normal Pidgeot, and you use the ability of normal Pidgeot to sort of end the game that way and make sure that they always have their worst Pokemon that they don't want in the active slot and take them out of the game. So Pidgeot EX, I think, could be pretty good, pretty powerful. The one downside of it is that there's no ramp or energy acceleration for colorless type attacks yet. I don't know if there ever will be. But this is a lot of damage for a 3 energy colorless attack. All right, speaking of 3 energy colorless attacks, we have Tauros, which honestly, I'm not sure about this one, guys. It's 100 health, double retreat cost, triple colorless energy for its attack, fighting tackle, 40 plus. If your opponent's active Pokemon is a Pokemon EX, it does 80 more damage. So yes, the first thing everyone's gonna think about is, yes, you can one-shot Pikachu EX with Tauros, or any 120 health Pokemon if they're Pokemon EX. Big one being Pikachu EX. That being said, this is going to be like a meta call. It's not going to be hitting those specific great breakpoints on every EX Pokemon like Pikachu EX does for Tauros. That being said, having a basic Pokemon that's only worth 1 prize card, being able to do 120 damage to an EX Pokemon is quite a lot. The downsides are the same though, like we just talked about. Colorless Pokemon have no energy ramp, and so if you're trying to race a Pikachu EX, right, it's going to be RNG. You better be on the play or be on the draw, so you get that energy first. So you get to put an energy on your Tauros, they put an energy on the Pikachu. You put an energy on the Tauros, they put an energy on the Pikachu. Tauros gets hit for 90 if he's in the active slot. Auto dies if they have Giovanni. Sad. So you don't want to do this energy race with Tauros in the active slot. You want him on the bench. So Pikachu X is going to be doing 90 damage to your active Pokemon. Best scenario for you, they play right into it. They kill your active Pokemon. You bring out Tauros. You put an energy on it. Boom, fighting tackle. Bam. Pikachu X gone. You're up by 1 point, right? You have 2. They have 1 point. You're 2. And then after that, I don't know what happens. I'm not really all that sure, right? They put out a Zapdos EX off the bench. Tauros is eating good, eating pretty. So in some circumstances, it's going to be a very good card. In other circumstances, against other non-Pikachu EXs, I'm not entirely sure. It does one-shot Mew EX with the use of Giovanni as well. I'm going to give it like a 3.5 out of 5. I think it's going to be a good way for you new players, or just budget players or whatever, or maybe you just hate Pokemon EXs, to have something in your deck, because you can slot it in any deck that is good against some of these super aggressive Pokemon EX decks. Even something like Starmie EX deck, right? If you have Giovanni, you can hit that breakpoint and KO that Starmie pretty easily there as well. So Tauros is very good, not against all Pikachu or all Pokemon EXs, but against some of the lower HP aggressive ones, the 120, 130 health ones. That is where it's going to shine. Coin flippers, this is your card, all right? EV, 60 health, continuous steps, 1 energy. Flip a coin until you get tails. Does 20 damage for every heads. Okay, if you want to get in there, yes, you can KO something on turn 1. You can KO somehow if your opponent had Charizard EX out in play. Just you could KO it, right? If you're that lucky. That being said, I mean, not my favorite. It's fine. Maybe something for the evolutionary lines for EVs. It's okay. You get a little bit lucky, you get a little bit unlucky. It's very similar to Kangaskhan, except it's not a wall. It's just something that's in your deck to evolve into Vaporeon or Jolteon or something. Then we have Chatot here. Chatot is very interesting. Now, Chatot is a card that reminds me of the red card bait. You look at Chatot and you're like, oh my gosh, I can shuffle my hand in my deck and draw 7, right? A lot of the times your opponent's not going to have a ton of cards in their hand. There are going to be some circumstances, right, where your opponent like can't attack or anything. They can't evolve on turn 1, right? They draw a card, don't play anything out of their hand, out of their bench, and they use Professor's Research and have like 5 or 6 cards in their hand. Then Chatot's really good in that circumstance because you can play cards out of your hand, Pokeball, put some energy down, evolve or whatever, and then just be like, oh, I have 2 cards in my hand. I'm going to shuffle my hand into my deck. My opponent has 5. I'm going to go up to 5 and probably win the game just off of that. In a lot of circumstances, though, you know, your opponent's going to empty their hand on the first turn that they can, have like 2 cards, right, in their hand. And you might not be in the same circumstance. So I'm interested in seeing how Chatot will get played. I think that it has the ability to be pretty good as well, because even if your opponent only has like 2 or 3 cards in their hand, if you're playing like a super aggressive low to the ground deck, which is kind of weird because you're spending a turn doing nothing in your super aggressive deck, but you empty your hand and your opponent has like 3 cards in their hand, or even 2 cards, Mimic on an empty hand is like draw 2, draw 3. Pretty good. I don't think that's what's going to happen though. A lot of the times the math and the gameplay just doesn't work out that way. I think a lot of the time you're going to try to play Chatot and you're going to have 2 to 4 cards in your hand. Your opponent's gonna have 2 to 4 cards in their hand. And a lot of times you're gonna be like, I'd rather just attack with what I've been building up instead of using Mimic. So the game's too fast paced. If we had like 6 points that we had to work towards, like we do in the paper game, then this would be a lot better of a card. But since, you know, Chatot going down 1 time, that's 1/3 of the points that your opponent needs to get. They KO your Chatot and then they KO your EX Pokemon and the game's over. So I'm not sold on this one, but I'll give it like a 2.5 out of 5 with room to grow. And next up we have Pokemon Flute, and Pokemon Flute's pretty interesting. It's either going to be really, really good or really, really bad. We talked about it briefly when we talked about Pidgeotto EX. Pokemon Flute is a trainer, okay? It's an item card. It's not a supporter, so you can just use this with a supporter if you want. Puts a basic Pokemon for your opponent's discard pile onto their bench. Now, how good is this? In a lot of circumstances, I don't think it's going to matter all that much. Here's the one general circumstance that this card will be good. You're playing against an opponent. You've already knocked out 2 non-EX Pokemon, so you already have 2 points. And then their last Pokemon that they have out is the Pokemon they've been putting all of their energy into all game. It's that Charizard with 8 energy on it, right? Or it's that Venusaur that's built up and they can just wall you for days. In that circumstance, Pokemon Flute's pretty good because you only need 1 more prize. You've already KO'd some non-EX Pokemon, right? Which means that there's probably not a whole lot on their bench. They're probably trying to play around Sabrina. You can Pokemon Flute, and because it's an item, you can Sabrina in the same turn and force their last bastion of hope, that big EX Pokemon, out of the active slot. Put in the garbage Pokemon that you chose to put out there, right? Maybe it's Magikarp, right? And you KO it and you win the game there. So in that circumstance, it's incredibly powerful to clean out a game against these super bulky EX stage 2 decks. Outside of that, though, it's not going to see a lot of play, right? You only need 3 points to win. So knocking out an EX Pokemon means you just need to knock out 1 of anything else anyway. And there's no real reason to knock out an EX Pokemon and then Pokemon Flute their EX Pokemon back out of the bench to just fight their EX Pokemon again in a lot of circumstances. So it's a very meta-dependent card. I could see it as like a 1 of in some decks. I'm gonna give it like a 3 out of 5. It's fine. All right, next up we have a card that I think it's gonna be pretty good. So Mythical Slab is a trainer, right? It's not a supporter. Look at the top card of your deck. If it's a Psychic Pokemon, put it in your hand. If it's not a Psychic Pokemon, put it on the bottom of your deck. Now, why would you want to play this card? Well, the main downside of the Mewtwo EX Gardevoir deck is that they sometimes have a very difficult time gaining access to the entirety of the Gardevoir line, or the Mewtwo, or in this case, the Mew EX as well. Is this a guarantee? No, but if you're looking through your deck and you say, you know, I have this 1 or 2 slots that they're kind of doing me good, but they're kind of not. You can think of this as like Pokeball Junior, right? Pokeball Junior. that helps you get your basics as well. It also can help you get your Colorless as well as your Gardevoirs on top of that. So if there's like even if it's just like a one of in the Psychic deck, I think it's pretty good. Having access to Mythical Slab plus Pokeball plus Professor's Research. Listen, even if it only adds like a 5% more consistency in getting that deck online, 5% more consistency is definitely what I want when I'm playing that deck. So I think this is a pretty darn good card for that list, for that setup. If you're looking for a little bit more consistency, Mythical Slap will probably give it to you. I'm gonna give this like a 4 out of 5. I think it's a pretty great card actually. And I think some people might be sleeping on it because it doesn't work all over the time. Now we also have Budding Expeditioner, which is another Psychic support card. I don't know what we're doing, but put Mew EX in your active slot back into your hand. So this is a pretty interesting card. It's basically Koga just for Mew EX. And one funny thing that you can do is, like I talked about with the Wheezing stall archetype, you now have the ability to semi-stall with Wheezing as well as Mew EX at the same time, which sounds funny. Outside of that deck specifically, I don't think I'll be playing this card. Outside of that deck specifically, this is like a 0.5 out of 5 star rarity card, right? This card is pretty bad, but I want to try that archetype. You have Wheezing stall, you have a little bit of Mew stall as well, and we'll see what happens there. But in general, I think this is a pretty poor card. Now we also have access to Blue, which is a great card depending on the circumstances. So there's a lot of deterministic games in Pokemon TCG Pocket where you'll look at it, you say, if my opponent has the Giovanni, I lose. My opponent doesn't have the Giovanni, I win. Blue can help you say, well, regardless of if my opponent has Giovanni to KO me, I will win this game. And so depending on what deck you're playing and what circumstances we're looking at, this can be pretty powerful. For instance, one of them, not that exact circumstance, but it's like if you're playing Starmie against, I don't know, Arcanine EX or whatever, right? Arcanine EX matches very well up against that Starmie deck because Arcanine with the Giovanni can come in and KO the Starmie, and the Starmie can't KO the Arcanine EX back. However, if you're the Starmie player, you can go, well, regardless of what happens, if they have the Giovanni or if they don't have the Giovanni, they can't kill my Starmie. I play blue, I hit them for 110. They can do whatever it is that they want. They're going to die next turn. I'm going to get those 2 prizes, and then I can retreat my Starmie or whatever for whatever I want and finish the Arcanine off. So in those circumstances, blue is going to be very powerful, and I don't think it'll be seen play outside of like some of the Sweat Lord competitive, decks out there for these specific breakpoint matchups. If you're that player though, keep an eye on blue. It's probably going to be worth like a slot or 2 in your deck. Last but definitely not least in this setup is going to be Leaf, the new supporter. Now Leaf is going to be awesome, and I think will allow some of these slower, stallier archetypes to sort of become better, because Pokemon is a very tempo-oriented, energy-efficient game, and a lot of the times just retreating some of these double retreat or triple retreat cost mons that you want to use out there, like walls like Kangaskhan or Executor EX, it's impossible to get them out of the active slot. It's why Weezing's one of the best ones, because you can just put it into your hand with Koga. Leaf isn't as good as Koga for these decks, but it helps you become super energy efficient. For example, like Executor EX, it's got a 1 energy attack. So you can put 1 energy on it, do a bunch of damage with it. It's got a large health pool. Eventually it's going to die though, right? And you're not going to want to keep putting energy on your Executor EX to retreat them. You're going to want to get them out of the active slot if possible using a combination of like, double X speed. Leaf is that double X speed for you. It is a supporter, and it does allow you to get rid of that Executor EX with its 1 energy that's already on it. You Leaf it, you can just get it out of the active slot. Is Leaf going to replace X speed in a lot of decks? Some decks that are like super slow, that only have triple retreat cost Pokemon, I could see it. I also do think that you're going to be playing X speed with Leaf at the same time, because Pokemon, this game, this version, is so tempo oriented and energy efficient oriented that having the ability to just, maybe you don't want to retreat the Executor because it's going to die. Maybe you want to retreat it just so you can keep it a little bit healthier and bring something else in, right? You have 1 energy on it, you Leaf, and then you use X speed. You get to retreat that guy for free, keep the energy on it so you can use them for a last-ditch effort later, and then bring something else that you've been working on the bench. Maybe bring that Celebi out, right? They've been working on, and do a bunch of damage with it that way. So I think Leaf is going to be awesome in a lot of these decks that have double and triple retreat costs. I don't think it's going to replace X speed in every deck. There's probably going to be a couple of them, maybe like the big heavy grass where everything's double, triple retreat. You'll put that in there, or maybe like the Lapras only or Lapras Articuno only decks, you put that in there. But I think a lot of decks you'll be able to put like one Leaf in there and be pretty happy with that, which is something that's pretty cool. So with that being said, that's every card in the new Mystical Island expansion. Let me know what your favorite ones are down below. Which ones do you think I definitely missed on, or which ones do you think about in a brand new light now? Hit that subscribe button. I'll be back for more Pokemon.